It is now Saturday, January 15th. Today's reading is Genesis 17 through 19. Hope you're having a great day so far. So for today's reading, real quick, let's dive right into it. Of course, chapter 17, talking about circumcision. Now, this was a covenant between Israel and God. It has nothing to do with us. Circumcision does nothing for you. But I also want you to notice in this chapter as you read this, Sarah doubted God's promise because the promise was made 12 years into the promise, before the promise was fulfilled. Hagar was sent, she brought Hagar in, and then Hagar and Abraham had Ishmael. And so even when we come up to the story now we're another 12 years later even from that. 13 actually. This says that Ishmael's 13, sorry. And so we're coming up on 25 years since the promise was made. The promise is made again, and Sarah laughs. But do you notice that God's promise is not compromised because of Sarah's unbelief and Sarah's laughing? It's interesting. God sticks to his word even when we don't. And so chapter 18, I want you to notice a couple things here. First is the words, the cry of Sodom. And that's going to be important when we get to the next chapter. Now notice here, you'll learn something in prayer. God's mind can be changed. Just like any other father, our kids walk up to us and, and bug us and bug us and bug us. We as fathers sometimes give in, even if we, know it's not the best outcome, whatever the case is. And well, God does that here. And Abraham says to God, will you destroy Sodom and Gomorrah if there are 50? But the interesting thing here is Abraham talked to God and got the number down. But he got it down to 10. And why do you think Abraham stopped at 10? And here's what I think happened. The reason for this is he knew that Lot's wife, his two daughters, and then we find his other two daughters, it is plural, their sons-in-law. And so now if we figure out, if they just have amongst them just two kids. So the thing here is Lot reached his family, and if his kids had listened to Lot, this whole thing would have been avoided. And so let's get down then to chapter 19. Notice we said in chapter 18, we said the cry of Sodom. Here in chapter 19, in verse 4, notice it uses the word every, all, young, and old. All of the men of the city were outside of there. So that begs the question. In chapter 18, when the Bible says the cry of Sodom, who is crying? If all the men are pining after these two angels. It ends up being, it's the cry of the children. The cry of the children. The sin of the older, but it's the cry of the children. So we find that Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't about God hating a certain group of people. It is that they were messing with kids. Matter of fact, the whole the conquest of the Promised Land, they had the god of Molech, and what they were doing is they were offering their own children on this altar, and they would roast their children alive. It's history and it's Bible. Look at both. The god of Molech. God does not take kindly to hurting kids. Matter of fact, Jesus, we talk about all the peace and everything he talks about, but then he says, hey, you know what? It'd be better if a millstone were hanging around your neck than you mess with one of these little ones. And so let's make sure we're protecting our kids. Churches should be protecting kids. Everybody ought to be protecting kids. And a lot of people died due to sin. So the whole thing there is, the funny thing to me is this, and I will leave you with this. People decry, hey, this loving God burned down Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, yeah, because he's protecting kids. Let's cut that off. Let's not let that keep on going. And the truth is that, that answer is still not good enough for everybody anyways. If, you hate God for, disagree with God with raining down fire and brimstone on a city, well, why doesn't God end all the evil? Why doesn't he do? Well, here he did it, and you complain about it. And so don't do that. All right, so hey, that's today's reading. A lot of interesting stuff in here, and so we're just going to keep on going. You have a great Saturday. Hope to see some of you at soul winning tomorrow. Or actually, that'll be today at 10 o'clock, handing out Bibles, New Testaments. The teens are supposed to be there as well. And say goodnight to our lazy dog Emma. You all have a great day.